Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this panel discussion in recognition of Fair Housing Month. Today's webinar theme borrows from the theme established by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, Fair Housing, More Than Just Words. My name is Diane Clements Boyd, and I'm the Executive Director of the Evansville-Vanderbilt County Human Relations Commission. Joining us today is an impressive group of professionals that are working to provide housing opportunities in our community, promoting growth to build and support this community. I will introduce the panel in just a short time. The Human Relations Commission is part of HUD's Fair Housing Assistance Program. We received substantial equivalence in 2009, which means our municipal code mirrors the Fair Housing Act, and this certification allows our office to investigate and adjudicate complaints of discrimination on behalf of HUD. Individuals that believe that they have been discriminated in housing can file a complaint with our office. We're located in room 209 of the Civic Center complex, and you can reach us by calling 812-436-4927 or email us at hrc@evansville.in.gov. We will start off this webinar this morning by providing an overview of the Fair Housing Act, followed by a short video. Please submit your questions in the chat, and we will try and answer them during this discussion. I will now turn it over to the investigative team of the Human Relations Commission, Jamila Smith, Anitra Murphy, and Shadrach Mensah, to provide an overview of the Fair Housing Act. Jamila?
Good morning, everyone. The Fair Housing Act was passed 53 years ago to address segregation and discrimination in housing. On April 11th, 1968, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Civil Rights Act of 1968. The Fair Housing Act is one of the last significant pieces of civil rights legislation passed as a result of the 1960s civil rights movement. The Department of Housing and Urban Development, better known as HUD, enforces the Fair Housing Act. HUD's mission is to promote non-discrimination and ensure fair and equal housing opportunities for all. HUD is charged by law to implement and enforce a wide array of civil rights laws, including the Fair Housing Act, Community Reinvestment Act, Section 3 of the Housing and Community Development Act, and Executive Order 11063. The Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination based on race, color, religion, national origin, persons with disabilities, and families with children. Because of the Fair Housing Act and municipal law, Evansville residents have access to housing opportunities and protections against discriminatory housing practices.
The Fair Housing Act has two goals: to end housing discrimination and to promote diverse, inclusive communities. The second goal is referred to as affirmatively furthering fair housing, and it embodies our strongly held American values of fair access and equal opportunity. Diverse, inclusive communities with access to good jobs, schools, healthcare, transportation, and housing are crucial to our nation's prosperity in the 21st century. Congress directed HUD to make sure that neither the agency itself nor the cities, counties, states, and public housing agencies it funds discriminate in their programs. Further, Congress intended that HUD programs be used to expand housing choices and help make all neighborhoods places of opportunity, providing their residents with access to the community assets and resources they need to flourish. In short, HUD is responsible for enforcing laws prohibiting housing discrimination. HUD's stated mission is to increase home ownership, support community development, and increase access to affordable housing free from discrimination.
The Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination by direct provider of housing, such as landlords and real estate companies, as well as other entities, such as municipalities, banks, or other lending institutions, and homeowners insurance companies whose discriminatory practices make housing unavailable to persons because of a protected class. To restate, under the Fair Housing Act, the following classes are protected: race, color, religion, sex, disability, familial status, and national origin. Also, under the Fair Housing Act, the following housing-related transactions are covered: rentals, sales, mortgage lending transactions, homeowners insurance, appraisals, advertising, and zoning and land use. Refusing to sell to, rent to, or otherwise deal with an interested tenant or buyer, which includes not returning calls or ignoring firm sales offers. Denying loans or insurance to prospective buyers of homes in certain neighborhoods is prohibited. Scrutinizing the loan application of one applicant more closely than another applicant because of race. Giving artificially low appraisals on properties in certain neighborhoods. Imposing different terms and conditions on a loan, such as a higher or lower fees, points, or rates is illegal. Applying different sales, rental, or occupancy terms for different people includes asking people of color to pay higher security deposits. The following zoning and land use related transactions are covered: definition of single-family zones, conditional and special unit permits, neighbor notice and comment periods, occupancy standards, restrictive covenants, health and safety standards, spacing requirements. A city may not deny zoning approval for a low-income housing development because the development may house residents with a particular protected characteristic that the community fears will increase crime and lower property values. A local government may not block a group home or deny a requested reasonable accommodation in response to neighbors' stereotyping fears or prejudices about persons with disabilities or a particular type of disability. The Act contains the following exemptions: single-family house exemption, Mrs. Murphy exemption, religious organization exemption, private club exemption, housing for older persons exemptions. Now, you will see a short video entitled Housing Segregation and Redlining in America.
So sad, man, you know it's wild? Martin Luther King stood for nonviolence. Now what's Martin Luther King? A street. And I don't give a fuck where you in America. If you're on Martin Luther King Boulevard, there's some violence going down.
That, of course, is Chris Rock's famous joke about streets named for Martin Luther King Jr., which tend to be in, let's say, distressed areas. And he's not wrong, because if you look at the way housing segregation works in America, you can see how things ended up this way. Once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. Okay, let's look at MLK Boulevard in Baltimore. I want to show you how to see housing segregation in schools, in health, in family wealth, in policing. But first, an explanatory comma. It's the 1930s in the wake of the Great Depression. FDR is president. He wants to bring economic relief to millions of Americans through a collection of federal programs and projects called the New Deal. One part of that New Deal was the National Housing Act of 1934, which introduced ideas like the 30-year mortgage and low fixed interest rates. So now you have all these lower income people who can afford homes. But how do you make sure they don't default on their new mortgages? Enter the Homeowners Loan Corporation. The HOLC created residential security maps, and these maps, they're where the term redlining comes from. Green meant best area, best people, aka businessmen. Blue meant good people, like white-collar families. Yellow meant a declining area with working-class families. And red meant detrimental influences, hazardous, like foreign-born people, low-class whites, and most significantly, Negroes. Again and again on these HOLC maps, one of the most consistent criteria for redline neighborhoods is the presence of Black and brown people. Let's be clear, studies show that people who lived in redlined areas were not necessarily more likely to default on their mortgages, but redlining made it difficult, if not impossible, to buy or refinance. So landlords abandon their properties, city services become unreliable, in most places crime increases, and property values drop. All of these conditions fester for 30 years as white people flee to the brand new suburbs popping up all over the country. Many of those suburbs institute rules called covenants that explicitly forbid selling homes to black people, and all of this was perfectly legal. Now it's 1968, and MLK is assassinated.
Good evening. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, 39
Apostle
years
of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot
Martin
to
Luther
death
King
in Memphis.
was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis.
In the aftermath, Congress passes the Fair Housing Act of 1968. It's a policy meant to encourage equal housing opportunities regardless of race or religion or national origin, and it offers protections for future homeowners and renters, but it does little to fix the damage already done. Over the next 50 years, the Fair Housing Act is rarely enforced. So you can still see housing segregation and its effects in Baltimore and often along any MLK Boulevard in any U.S. city, like its effects on wealth. So home ownership is the major way Americans create wealth, right? Well, discrimination in housing is the major reason that black families up and down the income scale have a tiny fraction of the family wealth that white families do, even white families with less education and lower incomes. For almost 30 years, 98% of FHA loans were handed out to white borrowers. Not only were black neighborhoods redlined, and not only was the Fair Housing Act selectively enforced, if at all, but it is still today much harder for a black person to get a mortgage or home loan than it is for a white person.
Families are fearful of speaking up about a basic human right that should be afforded to everyone in the world, but definitely in the richest country in the world.
And housing segregation in schools. The primary way that Americans pay for public schools is by paying property taxes. People who live in more valuable homes have better funded local schools, better paid teachers, better school facilities, and more resources. Here's a feedback loop. The better the schools in a neighborhood, the more those homes in that neighborhood are worth. And the higher the property values of those homes, the more money there is for schools, and so on and so on. And housing segregation in health. Because of urban planning that benefited those richer, whiter neighborhoods, people of color are more likely to live near industrial plants that spew toxic fumes. They're more likely to live far away from grocery stores with fresh food, and in places where the water isn't drinkable. They're more likely to live in neighborhoods with crumbling infrastructure and in homes with toxic paint.
When you're living with rats, roaches, and things like that, that's deplorable. You cannot have that kind of stuff with children running around in a building that may be full of lead.
And not coincidentally, people of color have higher incidences of certain cancers, asthma, and heart disease. And housing segregation in policing. Housing segregation means we are having vastly different experiences with crime and vastly different experiences with policing. Because our neighborhoods are so segregated, sometimes racial profiling can be camouflaged as spatial profiling, where living in certain areas can make you more likely to be stopped by the police. And it means that people have a lot of unnecessary contact with the criminal justice system just because of where they live.
The problem in our city, the police and the citizens are fighting. They keep targeting my brothers and sisters who don't really have nothing.
And that heavy, aggressive kind of policing that you see in black neighborhoods in particular makes people feel like they can't trust the police. And when people don't trust the police, crimes go unsolved, and people have to find other ways to keep themselves safe. But of course, it's not just Baltimore, because housing segregation and discrimination fundamentally shape the lives of people in nearly every major American city. It really is in everything.
Fair Housing Month is an opportunity to reflect on the history and the spirit of fair housing. It has been 53 years since the passage of the Fair Housing Act. And because of these government policies, we still have segregated neighborhoods, and some would say are still as segregated as when the law was passed in 1968. So this video, it provides some of the history of how government policies led to segregated neighborhoods and the perpetuation of housing discrimination. And while it does not go into the full depth of all aspects of the law, it does provide historical context in which the law came to fruition. The tenets of the fair housing apply to all of the organizations represented here today, including the Human Relations Commission. So now please allow me to introduce our panel for today. We have with us Silas Matcham, Executive Director of Evansville Promise Zone. We also have Sarita Cabell, Executive Director at Memorial Community Development Corporation. We also have Marcus Terry, Director of the Housing Choice Voucher Program at the Evansville Housing Authority. Also joining us is Stephanie Rowland, Senior Vice President and Director of Community Outreach at Old National Bank. We also have with us Beth Folds, Executive Director at Habitat for Humanity of Evansville. Also joining us is Alex Burton, 4th Ward City Councilman. And last, we have Josh Calhoun, Executive Director at Hope of Evansville. So thank you so much to all of our panel. And we will hear more from all of them in just a moment, but we are going to start. Our first question is directed to Mr. Matcham. Silas, please share with the audience the mission of the Evansville Promise Zone for those that may not know.
Yes, thank you for letting me comment today. I'm unable to turn my, okay, there we go. Thank you. Evansville Promise Zone itself is a 10-year designation that we received in 2016 from the federal government. It allows us to work collaboratively with our partners across the city of Evansville, Promise Zone itself, to work hand to hand on different issues across the city of Evansville. The Promise Zone itself is more of a resource and a kind of a background figure to our partners to help assist them in their missions and goals. So we are a direct connection to the federal government, as well as a partner on ground, helping you maneuver the particular initiatives that you set forth. The Promise Zone itself focuses in on 6 areas: job development, economic development, health, education, crime, and housing. So we work each and every day to help facilitate different initiatives or support current programming from our partners in those particular areas to make sure that we meet those objectives that we set forth within our 10-year designation. We are in year 5, so we're about halfway through, and we continue to work collaboratively with all of our partners to complete our goals that we told the federal government that we would finish.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And the next question is, can you just further discuss how the objectives of the Promise Zone align with the objectives of the Fair Housing Act to provide housing opportunities and revitalization of neighborhoods for all people, regardless of any of the protected classes covered by the Act?
Yes, the Promise Zone itself has a focus on housing. We submitted a number of goals that directly are connected to fair housing, helping those with the most need for homes across the city of Evansville. Through the Promise Zone, our goals and objectives are to provide more units of housing, affordable units of housing, to those individuals across the Promise Zone of the city of Evansville as a whole. So when we talk about opportunities for more affordable housing across the city of Evansville, we have a number of our partners. Promise Zone works collaboratively with our work group, which is a city group called House, and we connect with a lot of our partners to help facilitate that process. A lot of that being through tax tax credit projects. Some of our partners on here today have participated with the Promise Zone to receive tax credit projects, which ultimately helps with the development side of more affordable housing across the city of Evansville, or the Promise Zone in general. So there's a number of ways. We are overseen by HUD, so we have a direct connection and conversation with those individuals on a day-to-day basis, and that allows us to be apt to understand what the current climate is and what resources are coming in to help those create more affordable housing across the city of Evansville.
Thank you. And I remember when the Promise Zone was first unveiled, and it's been a few years ago, I believe, during the Obama administration. So could you tell me what has been some of the greatest challenges of implementing the objectives of the Promise Zone?
Yes, probably the number one that comes to mind is the change of administration. So we spent 4 years under a different administration that was not so much, let's just say, in tune with former administration's activities. So we spent 4 years just trying to stay valuable to the community by working with the now former administration and trying to align to some of their core objectives on their end. Initially, the Promise Zone in the Obama administration, taking into consideration that our Promise Zone in Evansville is around 3. There's 3 rounds of Promise Zones, and we were on the last bit of that part. And we never really had an opportunity to work underneath the Obama administration. As soon as we started our designation in Evansville, we were working with a new administration. And that became a tedious task to continue some of the processes that we had hoped to have received kind of dwindled away, not completely, but we were able to find some type of collaborative across the former administration now to continue some of the work that we've done. And we've been somewhat quite successful in those areas based on redesigning how we approach the different areas of focus that were given to us to accomplish. So again, finding a new identity. I can say now that there has been a change of administration again, and who are more apt to receive Promise Zone activities. And we have been actively communicating with the new administration, and we have a good feeling that we're going to be able to experience what we had originally wanted to experience almost 5 years ago.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to Sarita Cabell, Executive Director at Memorial Community Development Corporation. Good morning.
Good morning.
The first question for you is just tell us, what is the mission of Memorial Community Development Corporation, specifically related to providing housing?
Well, our mission is a little long, but I'd like to say that we look and take a holistic approach to serving the Evansville community. And within that, we say that we are looking to change the physical course, the social, the economic, and the educational course within our city, in particular, the center city of Evansville. So with that physical course, housing is our largest pillar, in which we've tried to add some positivity within the center city of Evansville.
One of the primary tenets of fair housing, Sarita, is to provide housing in a manner that does not perpetuate racial segregation or isolation. How has Memorial Community Development Corporation balanced that objective, considering the housing needs in vastly segregated and historically redlined neighborhoods?
Well, we're actually in a unique position of, especially in the Evansville area, of being a predominantly African-American led organization. So social change is kind of in, our DNA. It's a natural part of what we do. However, we often have to kind of dispel 2 myths and then work towards alleviating that racial segregation and redlining. And so the one myth is that our apartments and the programs that we offer are just for Memorial members, Memorial Baptist Church members, because that's one of the things we have to let people know, that our programs and our services are for everyone that's eligible, depending upon, those eligibility requirements. And then the second thing, we actually have to make sure that people don't think that we're doing a reverse discrimination, because we're associated with, the largest African American church in the community. It's only natural that we have a larger African American population that lives in our housing and that wants to participate in our housing, but that's not who we're limited to. So we do have, majority people that live in our housing and that are interested in our housing, and so we have to kind of do that. The flip side to that is that we work hard to ensure that the people that we serve with that predominantly African American population receives high quality housing, the affordable housing, but also create ways in which we can increase our values. And I think a lot of our partners here on the board, we've done a collective job and had a collective impact of increasing home values and home appraisals, which help increase the wealth in our community.
In finding land to build new housing, what has been some of your greatest challenges? Have you been able to find land in all parts of the city?
Well, since our focus has been the center city predominantly, we've had some challenges. Most of them haven't been the typical, like with larger areas, because there's a lot of blight within the center city, and our city has kind of stepped up to acquire some of that. It's actually been somewhat easier than larger cities may have encountered. Our biggest issues probably have been more so around out of town investors. So trying to acquire property and land from folks that are in California or New York, that have just purchased and they have no connection to the city. So dealing with them and getting that land or that home from them to be able to improve it can prove challenging. The other challenge sometimes comes with like airship properties. And so we have homes that we're interested in, or people are interested in selling to us, but because of how it's tied up with the family or multiple siblings, it can get a little complicated to unwind.
Thank you, Sarita. We'll come back to you just a little later for another question or two.
Thank you.
I would like to ask the next question to Marcus Terry, Director of the Housing Choice Voucher Program at the Evansville Housing Authority. Good morning.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
When we first started this discussion, I shared that the obligation to advance fair housing lies with all of us. The City of Evansville's most recent analysis of impediments to fair housing choice study indicated that some public housing tenants were not able to identify the Human Relations Commission as the correct agency in which to file a housing discrimination complaint. So I thought, wow, I'm going to ask this question to Marcus. What exactly, or tell us, Marcus, please inform our audience how the Evansville Housing Authority informs its residents on filing a complaint should they believe that their rights have been violated.
Okay. I'm speaking directly from the Housing Choice Voucher Program. We're required to complete a formal briefing for all of our families being issued new vouchers. As part of the presentation, not only do our families learn about the rules and regulations of the program, but HUD requires us to include information on the Fair Housing Act and some of the protections that it offers. A fair housing flyer is handed out with all of the materials that typically comes from your office, that basically contains your contact information and encourages our residents and clients that they feel like their rights have been violated to contact you all. One of the things that we really stress to our landlords is basically we want our clients to be treated in the exact same manner that you would your non-subsidized residents. We understand that there's a stigma sometimes that follows our clients, when they go to turn in applications, things of that sort. So we just basically want them to have, a fair opportunity. And if there's ever an opportunity or a chance that their rights have been violated, that basically they're comfortable contacting your office to, have fair representation.
Okay, we're going to make sure that we continue to work with your office so that we're providing flyers, maybe to put in those packets for new tenants, so that, we certainly want to make sure that everyone knows where to file a complaint. So thank you for that answer. The next question I have for you, Mark, is the history of public housing, like other housing, has a history of segregating its residents. So what steps are taken to ensure that public housing does not segregate or discriminate in its policies and practices?
I would say one of the biggest things our agency has done over the years is basically we've moved towards site-based waiting lists, which allows our applicants to choose the apartment community of their choice. We encourage our applicants to basically, study the schools. Maybe it's important that a bus line is available, grocery store, things of that sort. We've also gotten away from using preferences that we used to use around the time that I first started in the early 2000s. Now our applications are primarily based on date and time. It's just another way to avoid the potential of any type of discriminatory practices.
I'm sure that your agency has implemented changes as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So how are individuals serviced? Have there been changes in your policies due to COVID?
Very much so. We've actually been closed to the public since last April of 2020. As a result of being closed, EHA started to implement online processes to still meet the needs of our clients, our landlords. Some of the reporting can now be required online, utilizing our online portal. Some of our forms that we use on a daily basis are now available on our website for the clients to simply download the form. We actually, for the first time, we now have a drop box outside of our office, which allows clients to be able to drop off paperwork. In addition, we are now conducting some of our trainings and workshops virtually, similar to what we're doing today, with the goal is just being able to meet the needs of our clients.
Great. Thank you, Marcus. We'll come back to you for a question a little later. Our next question is for Stephanie Rowland, Senior Vice President and Director of Community Outreach at Old National Bank. Good morning, Stephanie.
Good morning.
Stephanie, as you know, fair housing applies to all aspects of housing transactions. Fair lending prohibits lenders from discriminating and must provide the same lending opportunities to everyone. The Home Mortgage Disclosure Act requires banks and financial institutions to provide mortgage data to the public to ensure that financial institutions are serving the housing needs of neighborhoods and communities. The Community Reinvestment Act also works to ensure that banks meet the credit needs of low and moderate income neighborhoods. So my first question to you is, how does Old National ensure that fair lending practices are followed and the needs of the communities are being served?
Sure. So regarding our fair lending practices, Old National has established a fair and responsible banking department. So we have an entire team that's dedicated to evaluating that data that you just referenced. And what they really do is assess and monitor our fair lending performance. And then they also take a look at our policies, our practices, our procedures, and even our products to ensure that we are free from discrimination in the way that we lend in our communities. This group is very heavily focused on analyzing our lending data to make sure that we're abiding by the fair housing laws as it relates to home mortgage lending, our consumer lending, as well as small business and commercial lending. And regarding how we're meeting needs, we have always stated that we want to be an active and engaged partner and investor in the communities that we serve. And as a result, last year, we developed a dedicated community outreach division, which is the area that I oversee. And my team consists of a group of community development officers covering all 5 states that we operate in. And their focus is really to engage in the community, to support some of those underserved and underrepresented neighborhoods and populations that we're trying to reach. We also have a dedicated financial empowerment director who focuses on providing financial education in the community. That's his one and only job, because we really feel like that's such an important component to some of the individuals that we're trying to get into home ownership. What can we teach them about the home buying process and helping them get prepared for that? And then last, but certainly not least, is our Old National Bank Foundation is also a part of our outreach division. And so that's how we really try to look at opportunities to invest in a meaningful way. So our team works very much directly with the Fair and Responsible Banking Division. We have a dialogue on the lending performance that we're seeing, and then we try to figure out if there are any gaps that we've noted, how can we do some targeted, really meaningful listening sessions in the community, working with a lot of the partners here that are on the call and on the panel. What can we do to really listen and be intentional about that, to learn what the needs are in the community? How can we be present in the neighborhoods that we're trying to reach, and then bring that information back to the bank to determine how can we use our resources to make a difference.
Thank you. The next question, Stephanie, can you discuss, community reinvestment initiatives, perhaps that have been implemented, are being planned or are being planned in the future?
Sure. So one thing that's really important to us is increasing affordability for homeowners that are looking to purchase homes. So one of the main ways that we address that is through offering down payment assistance funds. One of our strong partners in that process is the Federal Home Loan Bank of Indianapolis. So we participate in their home ownership opportunities program. And through this program, we're able to offer up to $5,000 in down payment and closing cost assistance funds to first-time home buyers who meet the eligibility criteria. Through some of the needs assessment work that we've done, we have developed our own suite of flexible mortgage products as well to make sure that we're meeting clients where they are. A lot of them have very low down payment assistance requirements. We have one in particular that does not require private mortgage insurance. So that's another way that we are trying to help increase affordability and ensure that individuals and families are achieving that goal of home ownership. We also work through the Federal Home Loan Bank to support activities surrounding their affordable housing program. This allows us to sponsor funding applications for developers who have an interest in building multifamily affordable rental units within our communities. And we can offer up to $500,000 in grant subsidy funds to help with that process. And so we've been able to utilize that program pretty frequently here in Evansville. And so those are a few of some of the initiatives that we focus on surrounding housing. And then also that financial education component for us is huge. So we continue to focus on home buyer education, credit counseling, just doing everything that we can to make sure that folks are ready to apply for the mortgage when that time comes for them.
So can you tell us how individuals can get information and organizations perhaps on CRA funds that are available and other funding to help with home ownership or perhaps even starting a small business?
Sure. Each financial institution that is governed by the Community Reinvestment Act will likely handle CRA funding opportunities a little bit differently. Typically, the best option is to approach a financial institution directly and ask to connect with their CRA, their community development, or their community outreach leader for that particular bank. A lot of organizations have set aside funding for CRA, or they may have specific goals in place surrounding making CRA investments. So I always suggest touching base with the bank directly. I know a lot of individuals and business owners in the community have done that with me directly. And it's just nice to have a dialogue to find out what the opportunity is that we can partner with to provide support. So that's one thing. The other is if you're going to approach a financial institution with a request for funding for a project or a program that may be CRA eligible, it's always important to understand what types of initiatives would qualify for CRA purposes. So there's a couple of websites that we normally recommend for that. OCC.gov, that's the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. That's who evaluates our CRA and our fair lending performance. They have a multitude of resources on their website related to funding and related to what qualifies as a CRA investment. And then also the Federal Reserve Bank, they have a community development division that can be Googled very easily. And they have a lot of resources specific to CRA and have very, very strong reference information there. Also going to your financial institution's website, we post all of our funding opportunities and resources for individuals as well as small businesses online. So that's also an avenue for you to take. But the best approach is always that one-on-one conversation or interaction.
Thank you so much. Our next question is for Beth Foltz, Executive Director at Habitat for Humanity of Evansville. Welcome. Beth, Habitat's mission and principles are based in Christian principles, and it's committed to racial equity as well. The concept centered on those in need of adequate shelter, working side by side with volunteers to build decent, affordable houses, and that houses would be built at no profit. Habitat also has a policy of non-proselytizing, so not to attempt to convert those who they are helping to their own religion. So Beth, could you please just start by providing a brief synopsis of Habitat of Evansville?
Thanks, Diane, so much. I appreciate all you're doing to promote fair housing in our community, and thank you for the invitation to be part of this panel. Habitat at its core is about fighting poverty through affordable home ownership. And so as we're implementing that, our mission, which is seeking to put God's love into action, Habitat builds homes, communities, and hope. You're exactly right. We are a Christian agency, but we do not use that as a basis for approving applications. You know, we are building homes for families alongside of families, and they actually help build the home that they end up buying from us at a 0% interest rate. And just to put that kind of in perspective, an average mortgage payment on a Habitat home, a 3-bedroom home, is about $400. And that's about half of what it costs for the average rent in Evansville. So it's a very affordable option. And as you heard in the NPR piece, home ownership is the primary way we build wealth. And so it is an affordable home ownership, wealth building opportunity for low income families.
Well, my next question was related to the provision of making sure individuals aren't discriminated against on the basis of religion. I think you covered that really well, but if there's anything more you'd like to add on, how Habitat works to ensure that individuals aren't discriminated against on the basis of religion.
Yeah. Well, and we base acceptance into the Habitat program based on 3 criteria. One is a family or individual has to have a need for housing. The second is they have to have that ability to pay for that home, that ability to pay that 0% interest mortgage. And third, they have to have that willingness to partner with us. That is that 300 sweat equity hours that you talked about. And so we have underwriting criteria just like banks have underwriting criteria, and we are very careful about implementing those across the board so that we are not violating any prohibitions for protected classes. So that really is at the core of what we believe, that fair housing is a right for everyone.
Beth, NIMBYism, or not in my backyard, is oftentimes a problem when organizations are seeking to purchase land to build affordable housing. How does Habitat work to provide housing in areas of high opportunity?
So we really have focused our building and our strategic plan focuses on 3 neighborhoods of high need. And we're actually doing a development, what is called St. Teresa Place. It's a 14 home subdivision in an area that we typically don't build in. And what we did was we had a meeting with the neighbors and we invited them to learn about the Habitat program. We invited them to meet some of our homeowners and just kind of dispel whatever myths they may have in their mind about what a Habitat homeowner is. And I think that relationship building where they get to meet somebody really puts things in perspective. And I will say in the neighborhoods that we are building, we have been there for so long, we've built some trust among the neighbors that are already residents in the neighborhood. And they know what we're doing there is building good quality homes for people who need that hand up.
Thank you, Beth. We'll come back and ask you one question a little later.
Thank you.
The next question is for Alex Burton, 4th Ward City Councilman. As an elected servant of the people, you're charged with addressing the needs of the community. Amongst the needs that you have identified include improving or providing housing opportunities in the 4th Ward. I know that's been a priority for you. So what are the greatest housing needs for residents living in the 4th Ward, an area that was redlined by government policies and some would say continues to experience the vestiges of redlining and disinvestment?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question. I'd say the need is for safe, quality, and affordable housing. Too many residents, though conditions are improving, but too many residents still have few options, and too many are living in awful conditions. For me, it's about increasing home ownership, as so many of the fellow panelists have mentioned. We have to increase home ownership, and that's the real goal for me. But the unfortunate reality is that predatory landlords who are taking advantage of tenants and overcharging and not really living up to any expectations, it's really got in the way. And as someone else mentioned, out-of-town players play a role. Those who have no interest in or desire in seeing Evansville becoming the best version of itself own property here and don't take care of it. And last but certainly not least, it comes down to policy change. COVID kind of got in the way, as with a lot of stuff, as it relates to the Unified Development Ordinance that's currently in process now. And the short of it all is housing will be able to be replenished much of the urban core. If you look behind me as an example on South Bedford, on that block, is a block north of where I live. There are currently 14 vacant lots in this block. According to the old ordinance, or the way things are as of right now, only about 6 or 7 homes will be able to be filled due to the minimum requirements that are currently in play. However, with the passing of the UDO, which is going to happen here soon, where 16 homes once stood, we'll now be able to put 16 homes back in that space.
That's sort of just a great segue into the next question, and that is, how can both the public and private sectors work together to address substandard housing in the 4th Ward or infill housing?
Yeah, I think my predecessor, Ms. Connie, and so many others in the community really got the ball rolling on that. really brought attention to the need for housing to really be a concern. And now here we are with, whether everyone on the call has got together, banded together, created organizations of organizations to really address the issue as it relates to housing. So now, regardless of who's in the room, we're all talking the same thing. Housing needs to be more of a concern. And I think now people are starting to get it, though it's unfortunate that it took COVID for things to really, for people to listen. People are listening right now in this moment, and we have to keep drumming. Housing is what we need. And the residents greatly appreciate our efforts and will continue to appreciate our efforts. And we'll soon reap the benefit of what we're preaching.
And I know you've identified housing as certainly an area that you would like to see improve, but what is your big picture vision for improving the plight of individuals and families living in the Fourth Ward?
Sure. Whether we're talking about access to food, housing, or the wealth gap, it's all interconnected. And you can add education to that as well. Because of COVID and what Congress has passed with the stimulus package that cities will also benefit from, the city of Evansville getting about $67.5 million. I am working very hard alongside several of my colleagues with the mayor's office to make sure that these funds that are coming into our community really close the gap and meet the needs of our residents, our most vulnerable residents. For far too long, access to food, the wealth gap, and frankly, just poverty have always been put on the back burner, and the excuse has always been, oh, well, there's no money to do that or address things the way we would like to. Now is our opportunity, and I really see this opportunity as our second attempt at reconstruction and really fulfilling what is needed for our community.
Thank you. And we'll come back for one last question in just a moment. But our last panelist is our former colleague here at the city, Mr. Josh Calhoun, and he is now Executive Director at Hope of Evansville. Hope provides services that support home ownership for low to moderate income people. According to the National Community Reinvestment Coalition, decades of racial injustice and economic inequality have led to persistent disparities in wealth, specifically for people of color. And we know, as was mentioned and restated so many times this morning, is one of the foundational steps in building wealth is home ownership. So my next question for Josh is, although Hope serves individuals according to income guidelines, are significant numbers of people of color utilizing these services that Hope provides? And if not, why?
That's a great question, Diane. Thank you. I'd have to say yes, particularly for us. We, on average, have about 15 to 20% of minorities taking advantage of our programs. And, our programs consist of down payment assistance, foreclosure prevention. We currently have a COVID program to assist with rent and utilities. We have financial literacy programs. So just overall, with all of our programs, we have about 15 to 20% participation. And within the various programs, some of those statistics change and are a little higher or lower, just depending on the program.
Josh, if thin credit and down payment assistance are the primary reasons for low home ownership rates, particularly in Black and Brown communities, how does Hope help to overcome these barriers?
Well, like I stated, we have a down payment assistance program. And so it's for low to moderate income individuals, where we help those individuals to repair credit. We help those individuals to understand the responsibility that comes with home ownership. And we help to create budgets and that sort of thing to help individuals get ready to own homes. And we provide up to $10,000 of down payment assistance to help them purchase their home once they've gone through our financial literacy programs. And, we've helped them with credit and that sort of thing. So that's one thing that we're doing to address the issues with credit and the lack of down payment. We also will help individuals who are not necessarily ready to purchase a home. We'll help them to create budgets, and we have programs that would provide assistance to help those individuals to get on track with their budgets. So they'll sit down with a housing counselor, go through all the fine details of their budget, and we figure out what is stopping them from being on target with their budget. And we provide up to $500 to help them to get on track with that.
Okay. We've talked about lack of affordable housing. What exactly is the status of affordable housing in Evansville? Is there a need for more 3 or 4 bedroom homes? Exactly what is the current state of our housing stock?
Well, it's been estimated there's about a 2,000 to 2,500 unit shortage of affordable rental housing. And so, in collaboration with a lot of the nonprofits that are on today, we've been purposely working together to figure out how to address the shortage of rental units, how to make more individuals homeowners. And so currently, Hope of Evansville, we have a 60-unit project that's going on that's all rental units. I know that Memorial, they're working to build 50 rental units that will be 1 to 3 bedrooms. Echo, they're working to provide 26 to 28 supportive units that will be rental units as well. And, there's a lot of other developments that are going on that aren't necessarily in our housing group of nonprofits, where we purposely plan how to address the rental unit shortage and how to make individuals homeowners, and where we're going to develop, and we strategically are planning that out, as a group of nonprofits that work in housing.
Okay, thank you, Josh, for that information. And I think that all of our panelists have provided our listening audience with a wealth of information. And I don't know if we have any questions in the chat that we need to address at this time, but we are going to do just a round robin. We're going to go around and allow each panelist just to talk about some of the accomplishments or greatest strengths of your program. And we're going to start with Josh. So Josh, just discuss some of Hope of Evansville's accomplishments.
Well, this is the really good part. I'll be quick. So like I stated before, we have 60 units that we're adding to the affordable housing rental issue. We've done 3 times as many down payment assistances that we have in any other year. And so last year we did 3 times as many as our most successful year. We've also saved 50 homes throughout the state of Indiana from foreclosure. And so those are 3 really important statistics that I wanted to share and that I'm really proud of my team for.
Alex, describe some of your accomplishments to improve the livelihoods of individuals in the 4th Ward that may feel left behind.
I'm piggyback off of what I said a little bit earlier, but really the things that were an issue pre-COVID have now become a priority in the middle of COVID. And so now people are paying attention, and that amplifies the voice, not only that I bring for the 4th Ward, but working with so many of you as we're in this work, trying to address housing and all the other things that so many in our community need our help with and need our assistance with. And so really just carrying it out and, staying focused on meeting the needs of people.
Beth, do you want to end with a few of the greatest accomplishments of Habitat?
Yeah. Well, I say every time a family cuts a ribbon on a Habitat home, I feel like it's the greatest accomplishment for our program, but also our community, because I know those families have a stable, safe place to live. And I know their life is going to get easier and better. And I tell this story about going to the doctor, and a nurse that was waiting on my mother at the doctor was a Habitat homeowner, and she had worked at a florist before. And so, she has greater income now because she was stabilized in a home and able to go after her education. And So 534 families, as of yesterday, have cut a ribbon on their home. And that competes with some of the largest cities in our country, you know, as far as getting homes through Habitat. So thank you to this community for their tremendous support.
Thank you for all that you do, Beth. Stephanie, do you want to discuss in closing Old National's greatest accomplishments to addressing the credit and lending needs of communities with the greatest need?
Sure, thank you. You know, the pandemic was very challenging for us as a financial institution. And so what I'm focusing on now in my closing comments are just some of the ways that we were able to provide supports during the pandemic to those that needed it the most. And so, Diane, earlier you mentioned supports for small businesses, and we were very actively engaged in the Paycheck Protection Program that was signed into law to provide some economic relief to businesses that were being impacted. So we were able to assist about 10,000 businesses and nonprofits with keeping their businesses afloat through payroll support. And that tied to about 160,000 jobs throughout our footprint. So being able to help folks retain their jobs was tremendous for us, because that meant that they were able to hopefully maintain their housing during that time. So just a lot of just wonderful success stories around that. And then also during the pandemic, there were a lot of individuals and families in need of loan extensions and payment deferrals and forbearance. So we really put an effort together to listen to what each individual family was needing and facing in order to keep them in their homes. So those are kind of a couple of things. And then we were able to provide over $220,000 in down payment assistance last year. A lot of that we worked in partnership with Hope, and we're able to couple Old National's funds with Hope funds. So the collaboration was just huge for us last year as well during the pandemic. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. And Marcus, tell us about your accomplishments in the last year.
Say we're most proud of our ability to be able to continue to meet the ever-changing needs of our voucher holders, our residents, our applicants, and landlords. We've recently been awarded special use vouchers to be able to assist homeless veterans and young adults exiting foster care to secure permanent housing. And even though right now we're the largest affordable housing provider in the city, the goal is to expand our inventory through rehab and new construction projects over the next 12 to 18 months to continue to meet the need of affordable housing in our city.
Thank you so much. Sarita, your greatest accomplishments.
I would actually say meeting people where they are and getting them where they need to be or where they want to be. Beth and I, we've kind of tag team on that a couple of times this week, actually. But just taking families from someone who may have been solely dependent on that Section 8 voucher, who is now eligible for $150K plus mortgage, or seeing that single mom go from raising her 2 or 3 kids to now moving into our senior housing, just having a productive, safe home to be able to do those great and wonderful things. But number wise, I'm kind of like with Josh, this is an explosive year for us. We'll be adding 50 units of additional housing. And next Tuesday, we'll be doing a groundbreaking on our 10 new construction homes, bringing us to 160 rental units, multifamily, and 26 single family homes.
Wonderful. Silas, you're our last panelist to share your successes.
From a Promise Zone standpoint, our successes are when our partners succeed in their missions and goals. So everything that you've heard from Habitat, Memorial, Hope of Evansville, EHA, when they're building and doing what they do best, the Promise Zone ultimately is successful because of the work that our partners are doing. We had a goal within the Promise Zone designation where we said that we would provide 250 new units of affordable new housing units across the Promise Zone by 2021. Through our partners that I just recently mentioned, we met that goal in 2019, and with these new additions coming on, we'll be way past 500 new units in 2021. So when they win, we win. So ultimately, we appreciate the efforts that they do.
Thank you to all of our panelists. We so appreciate you taking the time. Do we have any questions that we need to address?
We don't have any questions, but it was just some comments that said that Tanisha Carruthers, attorney at law, stated that she just referred a client to Hope and that you're doing amazing work. She also stated that Beth and her Habitat team are so invested in housing. And the comment is that OMB is definitely a champion for small businesses. So just some comments from the community.
We'll take that as well. We'll take that. Thank you, Jamila. So again, just wanted to remind our listening audience, if individuals believe that they have been discriminated in housing, they can file a complaint with our office. We're located in room 209 at the Civic Center complex, and you can also reach us at 812-436-4927 or email us at hrc@evansville.in.gov. Again, want to thank our panelists today for all of their information. Silas Matcham, Executive Director at the Evansville Promise Zone, Sarita Cabell, Executive Director at Memorial Community Development Corporation, Marcus Terry, Director of the Housing Choice Voucher Program at the Evansville Housing Authority, Stephanie Rowland, Senior Vice President and Director of Community Outreach at Old National Bank, Beth Boats, Executive Director at Habitat for Humanity of Evansville, Alex Burton, 4th Ward City Councilman, and Josh Calhoun, Executive Director at Hope of Evansville. Thank you all so much, and happy last day of Fair Housing Month.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.